Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Top Cut Academy. I am Professor Benji, and I am here, as always, to bring you some more Pokemon TCG content. And we are still focusing on the Tox Box deck that I made day 2 at Birmingham with. I don't mean to harp on about this, I just think that it is a uncommon deck. I was the only person to make day 2 with this particular variant of the deck, and so I feel like I'm in a good place to talk about why it's a good pick going into EUIC. This week I sort of started making this video, and then we obviously had the announcement over the weekend of Ascended Heroes not being legal for EUIC, and so I sort of stripped that video back, and I just thought, you know what, I'm just going to do a video focusing on the big 3 matchups, as the format pretty much stays exactly the same, which means that Gholdengo, Gardevoir, and Dragapult are all very much going to be sat at the top, still continuing their sort of reign of terror, not going anywhere, and will, I'm sure, make plenty of cuts and be all over day 2 and day 1 in EUIC. So I just think that this deck is a deck that I feel has a very good Gholdengo matchup, a favourable Dragapult matchup, and a 50-50 or maybe slightly unfavoured Gardy matchup. It has a pretty good time into all 3 decks, and all 3 matchups are very winnable. So I do think it is well placed. So as much as it's disappointing news that we're not going to be seeing Ascended Heroes for EUIC, as much as the set didn't bring many new things, Pokepad was 100% an upgrade for this deck. Not having to play as thick of an Ultra Ball count is really, really helpful. But obviously, that does mean that I can sort of play a very similar list. I do really like the list that I played. And so that leads us to this video. I want to show you guys how you can get better results into the top 3 decks in the format, and put yourself in a good place to play this deck at, maybe you're not taking the EUIC, but any cups, challenges, stuff like that, because it is a really, really fun deck and a little bit rogue. So without further ado, I think, I skipped ahead. So here's the list again. It's in all the videos I've shown of Tox Box. This is the exact list I played to Birmingham. I would not change anything from this list. I think every card really performed well. As I've mentioned, I would maybe like to get a second Petulant in, the small Petulant, that is, not an EX, just because it is very useful in a lot of matchups and give you an alternative win con, but I cannot get a card to cut for it. So that would be the sort of extra include I'd love, but unfortunately I think this is our 60 right here. But moving on, so we'll start with Dragapult Dusknoir. The main reason I want to start with this, it just won Birmingham, which will be sort of the biggest indicator of what the format in EUIC will be like, not just because there aren't many other tournaments before it, but also Birmingham, London, literally the same place. The UK is not a very big place. There will be a lot of the same people there, a lot of the same lists and stuff like that. And of course, now we're sticking in the same format. A lot of those players who maybe did well in day 2, day 1 with Dragapult will sort of stick to their guns and continue to practice this, and probably be that much better at the deck going into a tournament a couple of weeks later. So I think it's very important that whatever deck you play, you need to be able to have a good time into this. It's very popular in Europe, perhaps more so than it is in America. But yeah, for anyone sort of traveling over or anything like that, my biggest advice to you about the European meta, if you've not played in a European tournament before, is Dragapult is number 1, always here. So my big pointers, it's a big wall of text, but obviously I'm going to talk through it as well. You don't have to read it. So I would always pick second blind. You know that Dragapult has Budu. So realistically speaking, we want to, if we can, go second, just because it allows us to combat the Budu by using TM Evo. There's only 1 TM Evo in the deck, and it is literally for the item locking matchups, just because we play a thin sort of Ultra Ball line in just 3, and obviously have 3 Toxtricity. So unless we're sort of drawing into those with lilies, as we can't use Arven under item lock because the item that we grab can't be used, we're very much relying on the fact that TM Evo comes off in these matchups. We don't need to play any more than that, because obviously we can get into our evolutions without it. It's not like we, play Rare Candy and don't play a middle evolution, so it would be impossible. Obviously, it can just be a little bit of a slow burn then if you don't get into them. So always going second is great, and we're aiming for that TM Evo on turn 1. To be honest with you, if you don't get it, just using something like a Call for Family on the Toxel and getting your bench Pokemon down is sort of a good enough first turn thin your deck out, and then hopefully Lily will get you into your evolutions shortly after. And then I think that the next two lines sort of coming together, that we're sort of going to ignore Budu. I think that if we get the TM Evo off, we really don't need a lot else. We play Artisans, we play enough draw support to actually draw in to our basic Pokemon, and hopefully even you'll be able to Nest Ball or Artisan for something early in the game. We don't mind about letting our opponent get their bench set up. We would always rather get our board established before they item lock us, because they're always going to be able to find their way through. So whether it comes into a case of, do I play this Artisan? Do I play this Nest Ball now? I would say the answer is more often than not yes, unless you've actively seen your opponent completely and utterly dead draw. I would say that it's always correct to do that. Get yourself set up, get yourself in the game, put yourself in the best position to win the game, and the rest will come with. It's always a smaller risk to give your opponent a little bit of help than sort of hope that they dead draw and then you don't get yourself in the game. So I would always sort of use Sneasel and go around that. And by that, Sneasel has Strike the Sleeper, and so we're able to do 2 damage for every 1 damage on our opponent's bench Pokemon. So we are able to pick off Dreepies for just 3 damage counters. We're able to pick off Duskulls for just 2 damage counters, so on and so forth. So as soon as our Toxtricities are up, we get a Monkey Dory down and energy attached, and Sneasel only attacks for 2 energy. So those 2 Toxtricity can charge us up. We can move that energy over, the damage over, sorry, with the Drenabrain, and then we are able to sort of stop our opponent from getting set up. Now, don't get me wrong, as soon as they have down a couple of Dreepy, as we'll look in the next couple of slides, we're never going to stop them from getting to Dragapult, but it's about keeping up the prize race and getting ourselves ahead of the prize race before they start taking multiple prize turns later on. Now, Psyduck, unfortunately, is a card we have to play in order to combat this matchup. Our HP on a lot of our Pokemon is very low, making Dusknoir quite effective. However, on the flip side of things, there is a point in the game where our opponent popping Dusknoir allows us to sort of end up on even prizing, perhaps, and we can sort of go straight through a Dragapult, anything like that then, as, you know, we are a 1 prize deck primarily. As long as we don't sort of start our 2 prizes, we can keep that 1 prize board as long as we need to. So that's important to keep in mind, that sometimes once your Psyduck gets knocked out, it might not be the worst thing in the world as long as our opponent isn't sort of posing the threat of multiple Dusknoirs the next turn. You can just leave it off the board then. It's about keeping the Dusknoir away to make sure you can get into the game. And then from sort of the Sneasel, you are literally going to do a straight segue into taking knockouts with Root Bonnet. There's not really a mid-game that we have in this matchup. We're very much going to be preventing their setup, going around Budu, and then later on, we're going to be moving that damage, trying to Adrenabrain Budu, as it will still probably be on board, take a prize there, and take a big 2 prize knockout on Dragapult, a Pheasantipity, whatever's there, whatever you have access to, if you do have a bit of gust. But we're going to start getting really aggressive then with our Brute Bonnets. We'll have the time. Dragapult is quite slow to set up, and we can be quite aggressive with what we're doing with Sneasel, with Petulant, stuff like that. And so that is what we're going to do. We're going to segue straight into Brute Bonnet. We're not messing about. We want to get straight through those big numbers. So I've sort of set up a board sort of showing a turn 1 going second, as that's our ideal. Obviously, we haven't really got a better thing to do on turn 1. A lot of what we want to do is on the second turn of the game. I would just say, if you're going first, you just want to get down as many Toxels basics as you can, and then make sure that the following turn you sort of have the necessary means to get into your evolutions. I think that you're always better off sort of Ultra Balling and keeping a Toxtricity in hand, in hopes that you don't get Ionoed, because the likelihood is you're much more likely to get Itchy Pollen than you are Ionoed on your opponent's first turn going second. So therefore, it's pretty much always incentivized to get the Pokemon in your hand and hope that you can play that down before you get Ion Locked. So as you can see here, our board can look as simple as this on the first turn, and it is still a really good first turn for us. I've not included the hands here or anything like that, and obviously the hand sizes and the things on the discard, they don't really matter. Obviously, I've shown the Buddy Buddy Poffin and stuff like that here to show that, you know, we get 2 Toxels down, we get the TM Evo. Obviously, would have played an Arven for that. So I just think the important thing to note is we want 2 Toxtricity and something. This Petulant can be a Monkey Dory, this Petulant can be another Toxel. This, you know, it doesn't matter what it is, but we want something to use TM Evo to get those 2 Toxtricity up. So that is first things first. And then coming into our second turn strategy, you can see that now because we got the 2 Toxtricities down, and we've had the attachment from the first turn of the TM Evo, we've now got a free attachment onto Monkey Dory, as we know that Sneasel only costs 2 energy. So 2 energy are coming from Toxtricity, which will cause us 40 damage, and then all we need to actually find this turn, realistically, is our Monkey Dory and our attachment. We do play an energy search for this, so you can use Arven, sort of get that. Obviously, we play plenty of Artisan, plenty of Nest Ball, Lilies, stuff like that. So it's pretty easy to find. There's a 3 monkey count as well, 10 energy. So it's not very often you miss this on the second turn. And even if we're retreating, hard retreating here with Petulant, does not matter. This energy goes in the discard. We play 3 Super Rod. So it's all good. So what we're going to do is instantly charge up the damage to Sneasel. It's got 40 on it. Obviously, this turn we're only going to be able to move 30, as we've only got 1 Monkey Dory attachment. We don't want to be going mad trying to get E-switches and all that on our second turn. It's all good. This is all we need. And then segueing straight into the active, you can see you've got sort of turn 2. You've got sort of 2 options you can do. Now, if your opponent doesn't have a big hand left, or they play down a lot of their cards and maybe they have 1 draw supporter left in hand, or they don't, it doesn't seem, I would say you sort of want to go for Dreepies. No matter how many are there, we've always got Psyduck. The Dusclops for 50 doesn't do a lot for our opponent. It does allow Budu to take a knockout here with a 10 damage left. They'll do 20 and they can pop to do 80. But to be honest with you, I don't think that's a very good trade. We can obviously just set something else up and continue to take prizes, and then we go back ahead. So it's not a good play. So even though Psyduck isn't down here, I don't think the Duskull is something we want to worry about. So we want to start taking away the draw power. And all we need to do is move 30 over to a Dreepy, and Sneasel is able to use Strike the Sleeper to knock that out. And so the following turn, because we have 10 on Sneasel already, we can start charging up things on the bench and generating more damage, get another Monkey Dory down, and then we're actually able to move 4 damage over, which then allows us to do enough to get through Dracloaks, get through Dusclopses, so on and so forth. And so we're just going to be generating that damage early game, completely ignoring Budu, obviously, unless the bench Pokemon cease to exist, and then we just win the game. But yeah, we're just going to be shooting straight over its head, and then later on we can pick that Budu off. But the other option we have is we can actually just move 20 over and get rid of the Duskull. If they've got a big hand that looks like they're possibly going to be able to threaten a Dusknoir the following turn with a Rare Candy, if they do play Rare Candy, some lists do, some lists don't. It's pretty impossible to tell in the early game. So it's just something that you've got to sort of assess based on their hand size and stuff. But it's always helpful to get rid of Duskull as well. If there's 3 Dreepy down, it's pretty likely they're still going to be able to get into Dracloak that turn. Pretty likely they're going to get into a Dragapult later on in the game. So instead, we can sort of get rid of that Duskull, meaning we can leave space on our board for another turn, not to have to put down Psyduck, and they're not going to be able to get Dusknoir up in sort of the next turn or 2, depending on how good the hand is. So we can take that. But then the most important part of this is that we actually leave 20 damage on Sneasel, which means that the following turn, after taking the Duskull, if this Sneasel doesn't go anywhere and gets Itchy Pollen again, it goes up to 40 damage. So if we get another Monkey Dory down, we can move 40 damage over to a Dreepy Dracloak, and then we're actually able to get through all of those things as well. So the mass does sort of add up really nicely for us to get through the bench, and so this is our best option early game, just to keep our opponent at bay and not getting into the Dragapult. And then, as I said, late game, that straight switch. So as you can see here, we're sort of stopping them getting in the game. Eventually, they're going to get in the game. Everything else on the board is pretty irrelevant at this point. In the discards, everything, like I said, hands, all that. What I'm trying to show you is, at some point in the game, you want 2 Monkey Dory down, and you want Brute Bonnet in the active that has been charged up to, obviously, Toxtricity, stuff like that, and you're going to move that damage over to Dragapult. We only need 50 damage on a Dragapult to be able to take a knockout. I've just put 60 there as a small little example, but 50, so it's 50 plus 50 for every damage counter. So that's 50 plus 250 for the 5 damage counters, plus the 50 that's already on Dragapult. That is 350. So 5, all you need to get through it. Obviously, we go up in even numbers, so it's more than likely to be 40, 60, whatever else, but we can move that damage over. But then, of course, during that turn, let's say this Dragapult already had a little bit of damage on it, we could move that damage over to Budu, take a prize there, and take a knockout on the active. So later on in the game, we're trying to take multi-prize turns, big knockouts with Brute Bonnet. And of course, then if you see with the Psyduck in play, with their opponent's bench, if they got Hawlucha, yes, they're able to take Psyduck out in one turn, but they're not able to take any knockouts on our bench Pokemon. What do they leave? They leave 6 damage on our board for us to play with 2 Monkey Dories in play. That means we're more than likely going to be able to set up a knockout on the following turn as well, just by moving that damage back over. The Dragapult sort of becomes very reluctant to leave that 60, so they might sort of put 1 damage across all of your bench Pokemon, 2 damage here, 3 damage there and stuff, so you can't really move it all at once instead of getting rid of the Psyduck in one go. So there's lots of different ways about it, and they sort of have to mess with the damage counters a little bit more. And of course, with the Parent Monkey Dory, that means that they never really get to stack up either, and they can't take multi-prize turns. So the late game is very good for us. If we get to that late game, I feel like we're able to transition really well and start being aggressive, and then we often win. I just think that it's getting past this early stage of making sure we get a good enough board set up before we get Itchy Pollen, which is always the case against Dragapult, right? You always want to sort of get into the game before they lock you out, start to take prizes, and make sure we can keep up by the time we get to here, and Brute Bonnet can sort of seal up the game for us. I think the other option here that I've put in as well is Petulant is always another option. If they are able to take multi-prize turns, they get a little bit ahead of you. Hopefully they go down to 1 prize. You can keep that 1 prize board as nicely as you can. And then if they go down to 1 prize, Petulant actually does 300 damage. So all you're going to need is 1 charge up and 1 move from Monkey Dory. So even if you find that, this Psyduck wasn't in play, for example, let's just pretend it wasn't there, this Dusknoir could pop, maybe get rid of a Monkey Dory. The Dragapult could gust up a Toxtricity, knock that out, and sprinkle 30 on the bench. Okay, and they take 2 big prizes, and all you've got on your board then is a Toxtricity and 1 Monkey with an energy. All you need is a Nest Ball to win the game at that point. You literally need a Sinister Surge, attachment, and you go straight through with the 20 damage generated by Sinister Surge. For the energy, you attach and you knock out for 320. So you really don't need a lot in the late game to be able to get through these Dragapults. You just need to manage everything well and make sure you're not sort of leaving liabilities on board. Late game, you don't really want to be dropping Toxels down if they haven't used the Hawlucha, things like that. I think the lowest HP Pokemon you want on your bench is Psyduck in the late game, unless you're not able to establish Toxtricity, and you sort of got to take the risk to try and get that into play. But for the most part, we are literally getting those up early with TM Evo, and they should, if we get Psyduck down, stay for the rest of the game. So, moving on to Gardevoir EX. To be honest with you, the strategy is more or less the same, whether it's Jellicent or the 1 prize version. I think the only time this matchup becomes quite negative and can be a bit of a problem is if they play the Drifloon with the Heroes, no, not the Heroes Cape, the 2 Luxurious Cape. Thank you, brain. With a Luxurious Cape, just because they're able to really nicely uptrade into something like our Mega Absol then, or really nicely uptrade into our Petulant later on in the game. And so we just want to steer clear of that. What we're trying to do is take advantage of the fact that we have just as much Monkey Dory power as them, if not a little bit more. So we're actually able to not necessarily generate damage as efficiently as they are, but we're able to get rid of damage. And by that, I mean you want to move damage into what you're knocking out, unless you're taking a multi-prize turn, to keep that damage off board so they can't take multi-prize turns. Because as you can imagine, this is a very 1 prize versus 1 prize matchup, but we will always lose if you only go 1 prize into 1 prize, just because of how efficiently they can set up their attackers, whereas we need to establish Toxtricities all the time. And obviously, if they're using something like Screamtail, they can snipe those. So let's go through the list. We're picking second again because it's very similar, dodging the item lock sort of thing to the Pult matchup. They have Frillish, literally does the same thing as Budu, does 20 damage. The 20 damage is actually really helpful for us, unlike Budu, because the 20 damage, Budu only does it through weakness on certain things in the deck, whereas the Frillish always does 20, which means that we've pretty much always got damage to play with, and we only need 4 damage to get through a Jellicent later on. So actually keeping that and moving it back over quite efficiently is always going to work really well for us. So that's obviously a really nice upside, just to be able to sort of calculate our own damage to make sure we can use it against them. So we need to be a lot faster here, as we'll lose a one prize with one prize. As I said, they're able to set that up a lot more efficiently. We have less one prize attackers. And of course, if there's a Jellicent in the active or a Frillish in the active, and they're able to take knockouts, we're not going to be able to super rod our one prize attackers back in, whereas our opponent will be able to. And then we sort of get into a jam where we're forced to do things we don't want to do. However, that being said, there is a really nice segue in the game where you can move into Mega Absol, especially if the opponent doesn't play Drifloon. We can sort of manipulate our board in a way to get Mega Absol in, disrupt our opponent's hand, and start using Shadow Claw to sort of keep them out of the game. Yes, they're going to be able to charge up things like Screamtail if they get the resources back into the hand. But what we're going to be doing is getting rid of a key of attacker, getting rid of a Gardevoir, shuffling the hand, and trying to say, hopefully you now can't get back into the game, and Absol starts to run riot a little bit. And of course, Terminal Period is always something that we can rely on later on in the game to get through something a little bit bigger if we need to. But Shadow Claw is always the way. Like, I mean, Terminal Period is useful in something like a Mega Diancie, something like that. But of course, you can't always rely on that coming into play. So Shadow Claw is what we're going for in this regard. And I think that the biggest point I want to highlight about this matchup is energy management is most important in this matchup, and sort of the Gholdengo matchup as well, which we'll talk about, is that because the rate at which you're going to be knocked out, our attackers either cost 2 or 3 energy. So that is easy to do if we have Toxtricities in play. But our opponent is sniping our Toxtricities with our Screamtail, and we need to super rod energy back in to see energy. We need to super rod Toxels back in to get them back on board, so on and so forth. Like, energy becomes really important on where it's placed, because we need to be generating good attachments all the time, because it only takes us missing an attacker, then getting item locked, and not being able to super rod something back in for us to pretty much lose the game. And I think it was round 3 or 4 in Birmingham, I can't remember, I played Philip D'Souza, and this is literally what happened game 2. I didn't have a good start. I had to sort of Ultra Ball into my Toxel to then sort of the following turn Lily, and then Ultra Ball again, getting rid of some energy to get Toxtricity out, and then I had to sort of dig for an Artisan to get an attacker on board. And then by the time that attacker was on board and I actually knocked out something and got through the Jellicent, Philip just sort of realised that, like, wait a minute, if I just go back into Frillish here, you can't super rod anything back in, and you essentially run out of energy. And then because I took the knockout with Sneasel and sniped the Jellicent on the bench, because I wasn't then generating enough damage to do anything to his bench Pokemon, because they were like Monkey Dories and stuff like that, and there was only leaving 2 damage on me all the time, and I didn't have the energy to shuffle out. I then wasn't able to close out the game because I was locked out of my super rods. And because of the low amount of Gust we play, even when it gets into a Jellicent, it can be a little bit difficult to get out of that. It's really important that you sort of leave enough energy in deck to make sure you can generate your own damage and generate attackers as and when you need them. So, moving over to the board, it's going to look really similar to turn 1. The only difference is in this matchup is that we want to be a little bit more aggressive with getting our attackers out, because we want to sort of have multiple options going into turn 2, depending on what our opponent's board looks like. So if our opponent sort of was only able to get 1 Ralts out, now you never really want to have Petra and Sneasel out. I've just got them both out for the screenshot to sort of show you what I mean. If our opponent only has 1 Ralts out, we instantly want to prioritize using Strike the Sleeper and getting rid of Ralts. That much is obvious, right? You want to just move that damage over, you want to get rid of Ralts, and then hopefully they find it difficult to establish a Gardy over the next couple of turns, and we can just keep moving that damage over, okay? However, if our opponent gets down multiple Ralts, similar to the Dragapult matchup, this time though, they play a Rare Candy. So the chances are, with the draw support they have, you know, Lilies, Ionos, everything like that, they are going to be able to get into a Gardevoir at some point. Excuse me. So, at which point, it's not really worth our time right now, sort of trying to snipe through the Rolses if their hand is showing promise and their hand looks healthy. If they're dead drawing a little bit, maybe still worth it. They get 2 down, they can't do much else, then obviously we can try and lock them out of the game that way. But what we want to do instead is actually use our Petulant, because Petulant in this matchup is crazy, crazy value. Because if you see, we move into these Monkey Dories, we actually move the damage to our Petulant here, as like you can see here. Now, Poison Chain, 10 damage, and the opponent's poisoned, plus 5 more damage counters on poison, okay? Now, the great thing is all of that adds up to 70. However, Frillish is weak to Dark, which means Poison Chain will do 20 damage. And we're going to do the 1 for Poison going to 3, and the 5 more taking it to 80, meaning that we can knock out Frillishes with Poison, not activate Fez, and continue to take knockouts. And then it means that if this Petulant is still here, our opponent isn't going to want to use something like a Gardevoir or something like that to come up and knock this out. We might force them. They might not have another attacker on board ready to go, right? So that comes in the active, and then we can try and take advantage of trading up into a Gardevoir. There's not going to be many chances we have in this matchup to trade up, but that is one of them. If they give us our Gardevoir and attack with it, then happy days. So by getting rid of that, our opponent is pretty much relying on their hand with no Fez to get a Gardevoir, get a Frillish back out, get an energy to it, move it back into the active, and Oceanic Gloom again. Very difficult. And then as soon as they miss that, or don't get all of it, or get part of the combo, the game is in our hands then, because we've got this damage that we can start playing with. And as I said, we want to start making it disappear. So we can just start putting the damage on whatever's in the active and knocking it out. Whether that's with Petch, whether that's with Toxtricity, because Toxtricity is a decent attacker in this matchup, whatever that might be, okay? But what we want to do is get all of our board set up, everything in the right places, Monkey Dories with energies down with them while we're moving that damage off, because it means our opponent won't be able to take advantage of multi-prize turns very easily. They're always going to be limited to what Screen Tail can do, sniping things into the bench, and we can just continue to go through it. Now, that brings me to our next point. There'll come a point in the game where this pretty much exact board state happens, where we're sort of ignoring the discards, the deck, stuff like that. But we're just looking at the Pokemon on board and our hand, okay? Now, there'll come a point where you've got through a Thresh or a Jellicent, and our opponent started to use Screen Tail, okay? Now, when you see this about to happen, you want to put down this Mega Absol, you want to start charging it up, okay? Because the situation we have now is, if our opponent on the last turn used this, and let's say they killed a Monkey Dory, even if they killed a Toxtricity, right? We're in a position now, we can actually move just this single 10 damage, or this 40 damage, whichever one, right? And take a knockout here. This goes, we take a prize. You've then got Mega Absol staring down, a Gardevoir EX, Monkey Dories with Dark Energies, perhaps a Curlier, perhaps a Pheasantipity, all valuable key assets to our opponent's game plan. All of them. Everything on Gardevoir's bench later on in the game will be valuable. Even if it's their second Curlier, it's valuable. Even if it's sort of a third Monkey with a Dark, it's valuable. Against our deck, they want to be able to move as much damage as they can. But the thing is Screen Tail needs the damage on it to do the damage. And so therefore, this is our opening. And so what we want to do at that point is we want to use Unfair Stamp. We want to shuffle our opponent's hand down to 2. We want to take a multi-prize turn then. We want to move the damage, kill Scream Tail. Hopefully they put up Gardy. Hopefully we hit boss. I mean, the opportunities are endless, right? We can take 3, but even 2 here, because then what we're going to do is going to put them down to a 2-card hand. We're going to I keep saying Shadow Claw, Claw of Darkness, either way. Claw of Darkness, and we're going to get rid of cards in their hand, and then what they're going to be left with is either a Gardevoir with the only thing it's able to do is charge up itself, a Monkey Dory, and they're going to Mind Bend us, or they're going to use a Curlier for 30. probably not going to happen, because out of the card in their hand and the card they draw for turn, they need to get Rescue Stretcher, Super Rod, so on and so forth, Secret Box, all these different things to try and get their one prize attacker back in the deck. Because if there's one thing that Gardy does, is it plays low counts of its cards. So Glory Darkness becomes really, really effective. But then what becomes even better is, even if we get mind bended, at that point, we're so far ahead in the game, we're so dominant, that we can just put down Petra and EX and start moving Absol in and out. Mind bend no longer works. And we essentially create a complete hand and deck lock. Similar to the Mega Box deck, we are literally saying that Absol now carries us through the game. The damage that's on it at any point can be moved over for a terminal period, anything like that. If a Mega Diancie comes down, terminal period, that is, we're not going to be able to get through that in one hit. Gardevoir, Glory Darkness hits it for weakness anyway. We get through that. It just becomes so deadly then. And that's sort of this board state to here is a couple of turns, a couple of prizes away. But as soon as you can sort of see my opponent next turn is no longer going to be able to use Frillish or Jellicent to stop my board, I need to get Absol down and I need to attach to it and start attaching to it, because the most they can do to it if they're not playing Drifloon is 240 damage with a Mega Diancie. Even that, not enough at this point. We just need to get it on the board, establish it, and then start attacking with it. And I promise you that will get you over the line in this matchup. So this will probably make you all laugh, because this is how confident I am that this matchup is an absolute game-changingly good matchup. I think that Gholdengo is such a strong deck, and I feel that lots of decks can struggle to have good matchups into it. But wow, this deck really, really has a good time into it. I'm yet to lose to Gholdengo in any form, whether that be online, whether that be at tournaments, anything like that, all different variants. I feel very confident in this matchup. I think the only way to sort of lose is obviously playing as a very skilled player who knows their deck inside and out and knows exactly what to get rid of on your board. But that's the thing about playing a deck like this, is people don't know exactly what to do because it's a bit of a rogue pick. And the second thing is, it's obviously if you dead draw or don't have a good time or you don't sequence properly. But I'm here to tell you exactly how to do that, and it will be really easy. So this game should be straightforward as anything. Keep exchanging blows until Petron is able to take a KO. So this game, I can honestly tell you, pretty much always comes down to one prize. Our opponent will continue to bash through us, find it really easy to take knockouts, and they'll continue to push. But the thing is we can sit there and we can fall really far behind. Okay, we can even, they can go 3 prizes up. And as long as Brute Bonnets are then trading up in the late game into Gholdengos, it'll come down to the fact that they'll take 1 Brute Bonnet on 3, go down to 2. A Brute Bonnet will come back in and knock out another Gholdengo. They'll kill that and go down to 1. And then Petron will just be able to finish us off for the last 2 prizes. So it is pretty much always going to follow the same sort of linear path. The difference is we're going 2-2-2 prize exchange, but we can fall behind. So it just feels really, really good. So we want to keep a 1 prize board until the very end, as we're unlikely to be disrupted. So we don't need to put feds down. We don't need to sort of have Petra and EX and da-da-da and stuff like that in case they lock us, all these sort of things, right? The most they can do is sort of try to boss stall. Just make sure you've got balloons handy, make sure you've got Arvens sort of thing. Don't just willy-nilly attach balloons to Pokemon that don't necessarily need them. You're better off just holding them, waiting for your opponent to try and boss stall you, and then just balloon and move, because it's the only answer they have to try and cause any sort of disruption. Some Gholdengos are including 1 copy of Iono, but to be honest with you, it's not enough to stop us from getting to the point we need to. We generate damage. Our Pokemon are usually on board, and they're only to take them. They can't take multi-prize turns in a traditional sense. They can't sort of use masses of Monkey Dory damage to take a 1 prize Pokemon and take another in the active. They pretty much always hit into the active, and as long as there's a 1 prize Pokemon there, they're never going to be able to cause that much disruption through an Iono, because eventually we'll just draw out of it and get back into the game. So obviously our Brute Bonnets are going to be the thing trading up. And then I think that we need to be generating our own damage on a consistent basis. So make sure you get those toxicities in play early. Make sure you get 2 Monkey Dory down and get those energies on them early. They're going to be targeted down, obviously. That's absolutely fine. We just need to make sure we recycle them, get them on board, because again, all they can do is kill one thing at a time. If they boss up a Toxel that you've just put down, or they boss up a Monkey Dory and knock it out, but there's a Brute Bonnet with 3 energy on it. Well, guess what? The Brute Bonnet's going to come and take a knockout. So you get what I'm saying? They sort of have to go through the thing that's causing them problems in the active. Otherwise, it works out better for us anyway. So, Super Rod and energy management win the game here, and it's not sort of like Gardevoir where, you know, you can get locked out of having your Super Rod, stuff like that. It's more a case of, because Gholdengo has an easy time knocking out 2 prize Pokemon, 3 prize Pokemon, they have a very, very easy time knocking out our Pokemon. You know, they need 3 energy for the vast majority of things in our deck if we're not putting 2 prizes down. So it's really important that you sort of early game only attach the energy you need to, only generate with Sinister Surge the damage you need to take knockouts. As I said, we can sit back and wait. If we sort of have an attacker in the active, the damage isn't there, let them knock it out, move it back to the bench with a Super Rod and a Nest Ball, put the energy back on it with Sinister Surge, attach, and go again, instead of sort of trying to, you know, move the damage to the bench and then move it over and stuff like that, because there will come a point where, because we need to generate damage every turn and take knockouts every turn, you're going to run out of energy. So Super Rod and energy management are really, really important. Don't be discarding your Super Rods with Ultra Ball. There are always better targets in this matchup. The Super Rods, you're going to need 2 at least. We play 3, you are definitely going to need 2. So make sure you keep that in mind. Don't be discarding your Super Rods. And this slide is what I said you'll probably find funny. I don't need any sort of board thing to go through this with you. It is as simple as this. So early in the game, our opponent's going to start a Solrock. They're going to start trying to go through our things. All we want to do is set up our Toxtricities, and we want to get a Petulant or a Sneasel. If there's a Solrock in the active, and it's already got an energy, and it's ready to attack, we want to use a Petulant. The problem, the reason you want to do this is because we force them to either have a Vitality Band or a Premium Power Pro to be able to get through Petulant. If they don't, the damage ticks up and they knock themselves out going into their turn again, right? So we go up in prizes. If they don't have that and they have a slow setup and you only see 1 Gimmighoul on bench, well, you know, the same thing as Gardy, we're going to go for our Team Rocket Sneasel. So it's the same sort of thing as Gardy. If we think our opponent's got a decent setup, their hand's big, they've got Genesect down, they've got Gholdengos in hand, you know they're there, and obviously Petulant generating that damage is always good. Otherwise, we're going to be sniping those Gimmighouls with Sneasel. We want to get your Monkey Dories down with attachments as soon as possible. Our opponent plays a lot of boss, usually 4, usually a prime catcher. So you want to make sure you get these down as soon as possible. Our opponent doesn't play hand disruption for the most part. If they do, it's 1 Iono. If they're playing Iono early game, you know, great, more power to us, right? They can't use it late game. But you don't want to be sort of holding on to your Nest Balls, hoping that there's a better time to use them. Get your Monkey Dories in play, get your energy attached. The quicker you can move damage, you need 4 damage counters to kill a Gholdengo. That is it. 4 damage. That's 2 Sinister Surges and 2 monkeys. 1 monkey and an E-switch. Either way, right? It's very, very, very low maintenance. So get them down, get the attachments. And then these 3 cards are literally our late game, as I said. Now, unfair stamps there. You might think Gholdengo draws a bunch of cards. Of course they do. But the thing is that they're going to use so many superior energy retrievals, because they need one pretty much every time they want to take a knockout against us, because they're going to be drawing through the cards, they're going to be attaching a Solrock, then they're going to be using 3 energy every time they do it, except they've got to take 6 knockouts, realistically. We're never going to put a 2 prizer on board unless we start it for them to go through and take 2 prizes. They have to take 6, which means they're going to have to be really sparing with their energy. And so if we use an unfair stamp, the odds of actually missing a superior energy retrieval to get that energy back easily, or miss a metal energy for attachment, is actually quite high. So this becomes really good sort of in the mid to late game. But these 2 cards, Brute Bonnet, 4 damage, 50 plus 200, it's 250, plus the 4 damage already on them, 290, go straight through Gholdengos for just 2 Sinister Surges. Absolutely mental return. Incredible trader. And of course, it doesn't even feel that bad to do on Solrock, stuff like that, right? So you need 1 damage on them and you go straight through them. So then the Petulant, as I said, this prize map will pretty much, you just sort of want to control it and make it land on 1. There's not going to be any surprises in the deck. There's not going to be random Iron Hands. There's not going to be sort of like 2 Monkey Dory and 3 Dark Energy sort of thing. It is so unlikely that you never have to worry about it. And if you get caught out by it, more power to them. The deck is cool as shit, right? But you are very much in a means to make sure you can make our opponent land on one prize, and you're able to take the last two prizes with Petulant EX. And I can assure you, I'd think about 70, I reckon about 70, maybe 65, 70% of the games end up that way. You know, obviously Pokemon is a game of variance. You can't sort of guarantee the game plan ends up in the same place every time. You might have to find alternative ways to win. But Petulant is probably our most consistent. What I would say is if you've prized Petulant, don't forget you've always got Terminal Period. So that is another sort of caveat. You've got Terminal Period. You've got sort of, you know, even if you move 60 damage Monkey and use Glory Darkness, you know what I mean? Like, Mega Absol's not that bad to use late game. You just absolutely don't want to be using it late game. These are very much to take your last two prizes. So you do have Terminal, stuff like that. So just bear that in mind if Petulant is prized. But hopefully by that point in the game, you've taken enough of your prizes to see it. It's just if it's in that top left one, you might have a little bit of a problem. But yeah, it is as simple as that. Obviously, if you've got any sort of more detailed questions about the matchup, please feel free to ask. But it really, really is that simple. And so thank you for watching. I think that I've covered sort of as much as I can on this deck based on my experience with it so far. I think that obviously going into EUIC, I'm going to be testing this more. There's really no other deck, especially now that it's the same format that I'm going to be looking at. I'm just going to be sort of perfecting this. I do really like the 60, but if anyone's got any fresh ideas or anything you want to run by me, again, please let me know. But apart from that, guys, thank you very much for watching. I hope you're enjoying Tox Box as much as I am. Good luck with your testing for EUIC. You know, yeah, again, it is unfortunate about the bad news about Ascended Heroes, but I'm sure it'll be a great event all around. Anyway, much love, best of luck, Professor Benji, peace.